was having a conversation with one of my godsons about metteds and how they manifest, and it is a loophole. That's why we have to be careful with making demands. We want to say, hey, if you do this for me, you're definitely going to get this. Okay. And this is more advice for non-initiates. Initiates have the advantage of ongoing pacts that are multi-generational. So, anyways, talking about metteds and how they manifest in us. Like basically, we're talking. Imagine that there are rays of a rainbow, right? And someone could have well, generally people have particular qualities that associate with a particular ray, and these qualities kind of kind of create a destiny for them, not a destination. Um, so like every person can either radiate with a particular ray of the rainbow, sometimes the whole rainbow, right? In a few, in some instances. But that radiation that you're dealing with can generally play a role in your destiny. Okay, the things that you're going to experience in your life, the various arcs of your life will generally reflect around that particular ray. Um, so when we when I look at someone's hands and I'm looking at the person and I'm determining uh, their head spirit. After doing this for so many years, I can look at most people and kind of guess what their spirit is. Not because there are physical qualities that come along and that show up. There are behavioral things like it doesn't make up the whole personality, but it makes up a good portion of the stronger characteristics of someone. So, like if someone has symbion des eaux, the Simbi of two waters, also called Papa Simbi. When they have the Simbi, Symbion des Eaux is like really strong, really strong guy. Uh, Shows up like shirtless so you can see how big and strong and muscular he is, and he's like basically like the father to everyone. He carries you on his shoulders. He cares a lot. Really good Loa. And people that tend to have him, they tend to be like of a stronger natural build. They're like very stout individuals. They tend to they tend to uh, think about others before themselves to a fault, where there can be such a preoccupation on the needs of others that they often neglect their own needs. So sometimes just talking to someone for the briefest moment and observing them, I can see like, oh, okay, I know, I think I know who this is already. Other times it's, some people have, uh, and it's normal that they'll have multiple rays kind of coming through at once. Sometimes, and that could be due to childhood trauma or exposures to different spirits and spiritualities. And that is Saint Christopher, actually. Symbion des Eaux is Saint Christopher, um, and vice versa. Saint Christopher, Symbion des Eaux, Symbion des Eaux is Saint Christopher. Um, so a person can have multiple rays shining through, and it could be due to a traumatic experience. It could be due to being exposed to different spirits, like spiritual things happening at young ages, where they can acquire different spirits. And sometimes, in rare instances, they'll actually have like two very different energies trying, that are close to the head, and it can cause like a confusion in people. They can have almost like it might almost seem like they're bipolar, but they're not actually bipolar. Um, they usually have very troubled lives. And I see this happens with people that had families or parents that were always dabbling in different things. Like one year they're getting into Judaism, the next year they're Buddhist, and the next year after that they're Muslim. And believe me, I've seen this happen multiple times, or I've heard stories. And because of that, um, they have so many spirits that they wouldn't have normally had, but because of this, the ability in the modern world to kind of bounce from thing to thing to thing, that they have these spirits, and all these spirits are vying for an opportunity to, to have the experience of life. And in doing so, they tend to have bad luck. The person has bad luck, confused thoughts. Um, it'll feel like they can do anything they want, and yet they are typically unable to do anything. Um, that's pretty common from people that come from families of dabblers, and this also applies to having parents that are dabbling magicians. Same thing. Um, they could end up with someone could end up with a spirit due to witchcraft, someone casting witchcraft on, like a curse on a family or things like that. It can all There's so many like scenarios of how the natural connection of the head spirit can be disruptive. It can be a very traumatic experience, or prolonged trauma over a period of time can weaken the connection of the head spirit and make it less stable. And instead of the person connecting with that particular energy, their array, instead they end up connecting with a ghost that might have stepped in to shield the child from trauma. And then as an adult, they have they're blocked, they dissociate easily, and they tend to have difficult lives, have difficulty accomplishing tasks because there is a ghost that has now injected itself into their ray. Atheism doesn't cause children to lose their spirits, but it can cause them to be like weakly connected to their spirits. Um, like a parent, you have your own soul, you have your own spirit. Now, it's it all depends on like really like if the parent is trying to kill the imagination of the child. There are people that are atheist that let their children believe in whatever the child wants to believe in, and that's fine. And there's other ones that turn their children into strict materialists, and the child becomes materialistic, and they can have difficulties later on in life from the rejecting of the metaphysical. So yeah, I mean, there's just so many different things that can happen. I mean, relationship with the head spirit can be disrupted by a kid being exposed to fireworks at the wrong moment in childhood. And then it'll seem like they have like ADHD, or they suddenly dissociate because they're when at a crucial moment in their development, um, where those bonds are forming with the soul and the spirit and all of that, and where the beginnings of the mind and the self, instead it gets disrupted by fireworks, which are traumatic for children. So, I mean, long story short, like with training and time, you can easily see what someone's working with. There are those in voodoo that believe that it is impossible to know the head spirit without a person going through a couche, where it's a specialized ceremony, usually that accompanies a lave-tete, where they sleep in someone's umfor and their dreams are interpreted. And some say that even that couche isn't enough, that as they have to have they have to have lave-tete, their heads need to be washed before anyone can determine who it is. But like I said, there are people that strictly believe that, but then there are lots of people that I've known that determine um, head spirits through various ways. When I met another priest of my lineage, he's like, we were talking about that. He's like, well, how do you determine the head spirit? I said, I read hands. He goes, how do you do that? It's like, I've never seen that. I want to see it. So I read his hands and I told him exactly what I saw. And he goes, that's all right. That's correct. Wow, that's amazing. I've never seen that before, but that's really interesting. Other ones where they use a bell and they kind of just let the bell randomly ring, and depending on how many times it rings, it's a yes, a no. And other ones are reading the face. Some of them are purely psychic. Okay. Um, but it's all whatever you were exposed to. And Gene was really big on reading hands. I mean, I saw hundreds of hands through Gene. Like he'd show me pictures of people's hands, show me the lines, and it took years to connect all the dots. It wasn't until like a few years ago where it suddenly just clicked, where I was looking at a woman's hands and I could see Saint Teresa in her hand, and I'm like, oh, I see Saint Teresa in your hand, and it's like she's new for you, like you weren't born with her, but there she is, like in your hand. And she goes, I just was baptized in a church, in the Church of Saint Teresa. I had no way of knowing that, but I could clearly see the figure in her hands. Okay. Um, it requires a connection with the spirit in order to make these determinations. And this is something I've said before. The limitations on what you can do magically and spiritually are almost entirely on your beliefs. If you don't believe that something can be done, then it most certainly can't be done. And I used to have a lot of limiting beliefs uh, that affected my ability to do magic. And the longer I've done magic now, I mean, I'll tell you, I think that anything is possible. There are a few things that I simply, we can't turn the day into night, right? There are certain things that are occurring naturally that we cannot change or affect. We can affect perceptions of things, but there are certain natural things that we can't change. Now, I'm one of those people that's like I just don't believe time travel is possible. Sorry. I can, we can talk about the math and everything, the trajectory through which our solar system's moving through the universe and the speed through which we're traveling, that even if we went back in time 1 second, you would either be flying off into space or be like a mile under the Earth's surface. At an angle too. It wouldn't even be like right where you were standing. You'd be like at an angle going through the earth, or you'd be flying off into space. So, there are limitations, but overall, I've seen cancer healed. That's been one of the biggest things. I've seen AIDS healed. Um, so, I mean, I saw someone that was on the brink of death, come back and live like 3 more years. Some of you probably remember Ms. Lilith. I don't know, any of you remember Ms. Lilith? She was um, a mambo in our house, and she became a mambo after a near-death experience. Basically, I believe she had a stroke. It was either she had a stroke or an aneurysm, and they didn't think she was going to wake up. They basically said she was dead, and basically Moloch went to Jean, and Jean did what he could for her. And after she came back, they're like, "Hey, we should initiate you, see, so we can make sure that this healing lasts." And she got initiated, became a mambo, and was on like, living a pretty comfortable life considering that she was supposed to be dead. And I want to say she lived like 5 or 6 more years, and then she died suddenly. She went to the gym, was working out, and had a massive aneurysm and died instantly. They said she was dead immediately. That she didn't even know that there's no way she could have even comprehended that something was happening. So I know for a fact that anything could happen because she was supposed to die, years before that happened, and instead she got to enjoy several more years of life and do the things that she wanted to do. Um, I'm sure she had no way of knowing when her time was going to be up because it's also a comfort thing for us. But that quick death and Not being laid up on machines for months it's always a blessing. So yeah, anything's possible. Anything is possible.